Well, I grew up here in Silicon Valley. There's no other place in the world that I think is as interesting, and it's because all the smart people come here.
Done is better than perfect.
I think the way to build a billion-dollar internet company is you need to go out and see what people are already doing and build a service based upon the internet that helps people do what they're already doing, but in much fewer steps.
Tony Perkins, welcome to Talk to Walk.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for your time. What's entrepreneurship for you?
I think at the heart of all entrepreneurs, or at least the great ones, is just a passion to change the world, to make it a better place. So whether you look at Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, that's the common trait.
Was there a time that you found yourself an entrepreneur?
Well, I grew up here in Silicon Valley, and the first way I made money was I used to go to the Stanford golf course and fish golf balls out of the creek along the golf course, and then sell those golf balls along with lemonade at the driving range. And I was about 9 years old, and I used to make like $40 in a day. And
wow,
and that was a lot of money.
That's a good money.
That was a lot of money. So
wow.
I never was hard up for finding money to buy candy, because I always had it in my pocket.
Very good. And you met a lot of good people then as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, when I look back, I met Steve Jobs when I was about 12. He was probably 18 and running the Homebrew Computer Club.
Wow.
My father was a physician at Stanford, and one of his patients was Dave Packard, the founder of Hewlett Packard. So I didn't really realize it when I was going through it, but now that I look back, I can certainly see that I'm a son of Silicon Valley.
Very good. Let's talk about yourself. How is Tony Perkins like with the family, and how did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a good family. Again, my father was a clinical professor at Stanford and was the founder of the Palo Alto Clinic, which has become a large clinic here in California, and just had a pretty much an average, happy white boy, upper middle class, Northern California, upbringing. Part of that is that we love where we are. We have great music, so I grew up with great music, beautiful surroundings, and probably most interesting is that people have come to Silicon Valley from all over the world my entire life. So I grew up meeting people from all over the world, and it's for that reason
so
alone.
Global culture forever.
Yeah, I would never leave, because there's no other place in the world that I think is as interesting, and it's because all the smart people come here.
Do you watch TV?
I only watch Netflix and Apple TV. Why? Is there a show?
And HandsOn.TV as well, or no?
Of course, I would never miss an episode of Hands On.
Okay, cool. How do you get informed? Where is the place that you look for information? Of course, Always On is one of them.
Well, I think that is kind of an interesting question. In the 90s, when the internet was first taking off, I started a magazine called Red Herring, and we covered private cool companies like Yahoo, Amazon, eBay in those days, Pixar, and this is all when they were just starting. And in those days, there wasn't enough information about cool companies. Today, I'm afraid to say that there's almost too much information out there, so it's very overwhelming. And most of the information is very not that insightful, right? It's just the facts that are being pushed out there, but there's a lack of smart editors and writers that are kind of looking at it and analyzing that information and helping the reader really learn from it. So I think there's an opportunity, which is what we see at Always On, to create a global network that brings together the best and brightest thinking. But you have to do it in a way that is very filtered, in a way that has a format that makes it more interesting and actionable for the reader.
Okay, let's go back a little bit and start with your first company. What was it?
Well, when I was real young, I helped start a bank called Silicon Valley Bank. which of course is now a $30 billion bank. So in those days, I was probably 22, 23, and I was the co-founder of the technology group. So it was my job, it was to go out and find startups that I could lend money to.
Wow.
And again, we started with $5 million, and now it's a $30 billion bank. And it's all over the world. It's in China, and it's in India. It's in all the entrepreneurial centers on the planet. So that was my first experience. Then, of course, I then parlayed into media, where I had, I believe, the best print magazine during the first internet boom, and wrote a book called The Internet Bubble, What You Need to Know Before the Coming Shakeout. So I wrote about it before everybody, and then I suffered when the bubble burst, because a lot of companies were kind of propped up on too much excitement.
How is that? You think you were, of course you're not the responsible of the bubble, but you think when you tell people, oh, this is gonna happen, then it's easier to happen?
Well, I haven't taken a math class since I was like a sophomore in high school, but I'm a big believer in math. I believe that when it comes to business, you need to apply math as often as possible to kind of just evaluate where you are. And clearly, the internet bubble, where a bunch of companies that were going public that should have never gone public, they didn't really have the revenues and the profits necessary to sustain themselves. So it was a pretty drastic phenomenon that happened, and people just got so excited that they just ran away with company valuations, and then it was inevitable that the whole thing blew up, and it did.
And how was that experience for you?
I was very famous for a while because I was the one, I predicted that the bubble was going to burst. I was famous because I produced the biggest business magazine ever in the history of the United States, which was 685 pages.
Wow.
About 300 and some odd ads at the top of the bubble. But that phenomenon drove my media company to 110 million in revenue. And then it completely blew up because a lot of the companies that were advertising were not real companies, and they went out of business. So we saw a very rapid decline in our business, and that wasn't so much fun. It wasn't, it wasn't that it wasn't happening to everybody else. So
How many people do you have with you on that time in the company?
We reached about 300.
300 people.
Right. And
Wow.
of course, we were just starting redherring.com. So that is at the point in history which seems like forever ago, but really wasn't that long ago, which was only 10 or 12 years ago, where media companies were just starting to move on to the internet.
What were the changes on that time?
What were the changes?
What have you changed in your strategy business?
Well, I think we've learned a lot about what the real value of the internet is. And we've certainly, I think the media world is still learning and losing the internet game. So most of the old media companies that are just producing and pushing out content the old-fashioned way are not doing well, and they're slowly being downsized to much smaller companies.
So then we come to Always On, right?
Right.
So when did you build Always On?
I started in 2003.
3.
Right.
Okay, so say 2 years after.
Right.
And then why did you start Always On?
Well, I had sold a part of my company before the bubble burst, so Red Herring. I was part of the agreement with the new investors is that that we all agreed that we were going to get a new CEO, because I didn't want to operate a company of 300 people. And I started thinking about the next brand that I wanted to create, and at that time blogging became very fashionable. It was very early, but it was a very new thing, and I thought that was a very good thing. So I really started Always On as a super blog, and several companies followed after me. GigaOM, VentureBeat, TechCrunch all followed our lead in terms of the model that we had come up with. But then after a couple of years of doing that, I still felt that that model was still old media, and I started getting more excited about social media. And so what we're about to do is launch a social network for the global Silicon Valley that is really a combination of a media, blogging, analytics, and social community.
Tell me about this new business.
Well, in a very pure way, and I met Mark Zuckerberg when he first showed up in Silicon Valley and was renting a home in Palo Alto. So I followed the company from the very beginning, and also the predecessor to Facebook was a company called Friendster, which didn't survive, but there would have been no Facebook if there had not been a Friendster, because Friendster was the first social network that kind of exposed the value of creating a membership that could see and connect with each other online. So believe it or not, that was a big new trick on the internet in 2004 or whenever it was. And Facebook did a brilliant thing, which it says, hey, we live in a world where everybody kind of moves around, and in Facebook you can connect with friends that you might normally lose contact with, and then have your own personal newspaper that tells you about the news about your friends. So some people overfriend, and they bastardize the system, and they make it so it's not useful because they end up having friends that they don't really care about or know. But if you use it in a purest sense, it's a really great way, I believe, to keep up with your friends. So what we want to do is we're creating that type of format, but rather than just connect with friends, you're connecting with professionals that you admire, you're tracking companies that you think are cool, you're tracking investors that you think you want us to keep up with, and you're creating your own personal newspaper for the global Silicon Valley. So at a very fundamental level, that's why it's like a Facebook for adults.
And what are the times now? When can I start using? When can people start using?
Well, we hope to make our alpha version available to our very dear friends like you in December.
December.
Okay. And we will roll it out to larger and larger audiences. It's interesting, in an interview I did once with Mark Zuckerberg, they have little signs around Facebook, and I forget what this one sign says, but it's something like, just put it out there. It doesn't need to be, it's never done.
Yeah.
Right?
So
I think the idea, especially in the online environment, is that you can put stuff out there, and it's better to get it out than make it perfect, or get it out now than get it perfect, or something like that.
Yeah.
So the whole point being is that you just got to get it out there, and then you iterate, and you actually you have the tools where you can actually see what people are looking at, and we're going to have a very strong black box component that's going to be introducing you to people, really understanding how you think, how you describe yourself, what you read, and we'll be introducing a lot of companies, people, investors, and content to you. We will give you a lot of social data analytics. Everybody's going to be ranked on a power ranking, so you'll be able to compare companies on how powerful their network and how much buzz they're getting, things like that.
I think I've seen the sign. I don't know, I might have a picture, but actually what it says is like, it's nothing perfect.
Right.
It's never perfect.
Right.
So it needs to be done.
Right. Yeah.
It's something around that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is my wife's phone.
Sure.
Done is better than perfect.
Right.
So this is the phrase that we want to know. Right. Let's show here. Done is better than perfect. So this is a Facebook phrase, probably Mark Zuckerberg phrase or somebody else phrase.
Yeah, it's part of their corporate culture.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. So yes, now my wondering here. You have so many stories about Silicon Valley, but so many.
Yes.
What are the stories that you can tell me? A couple of them I'm sure you can't, but what's the story that you say that, you know what, I think people should know this story because we learn a lot from it?
Okay, I hope I can tell you this in a concise manner, but back in 1996, and I can show you, I shall create the cover for you, But back in 1996, I interviewed Steve Jobs, and this is when he was about to take Pixar public, but he was still at Next. So he hadn't sold Next to Apple yet. So he hadn't taken over Apple again. And in the interview, I asked him, I said, you know, Steve, I've talked to a lot of people that you worked with you when you built the original Macintosh computer. And pretty much all of them said that that was the most exciting experience they ever had in their life, but they're not so sure whether they would go back to work for Steve again. So as we know, spinning forward from his new biography by Walter Isaacson, Walter makes him like he's some kind of not so nice person. So I asked him, I said, so what did you think about, you know, this comment? And he said, well, he goes, when I was like 10 years old, there was a guy that lived down the street. He was like 80 years old. He was a widower. He was a tinkerer in his garage. And I used to always go in his garage, and we'd put things together and take things apart. And one day he called me into the garage and said, hey, Steve, look at this. And he goes, what's that? And he goes, it's a rock tumbler. And so he said, let's go out in the backyard. So they went out in the backyard, got 5 rocks, put it in the tumbler, put the cap on the tumbler, plugged it in, and started making all this noise, right? And so the guy said to Steve, you know, come back tomorrow. So Steve came back the next day, and there was the tumbler, and the guy said, here, you know, open the top and shake it out. So he opened the top, shook it out, and there were 5 shiny rocks, okay? And the moral to the story is that what Steve believes and what I believe is that, you know, when you're building a great product, you go out and you find the best rocks you can find, you put them in the tumbler, but it's really the friction between the rocks that creates the shine, okay? So in the creative process, you can't be afraid to have a group of people who are so passionate about what they're trying to produce that they are not afraid to, you know, to pour their heart and soul of it, and even to the point where you might insult each other or you might cause friction because you're so opinionated about, you know, where you want something to go. So I think the moral to the story is that we have, with our iPhones and our Macintoshes and our all their products that they've given us, the Apple stores, that those are all the product of really smart people getting in the tumbler and really fighting it out to come out with the best product. And the idea is that in the end, the reward is creating great products, right? And you should enjoy the journey while you're getting there, but it's not about ego, it's not about who comes up with the best idea, it's about working together with a team and creating the best products. And so
how do you find yourself as a leader of a team?
I have always been a leader, but it's kind of like the Pope. You know, it's like somebody's got to be the Pope, but it's not always the best guy for the job. You know, we forget, but if Peter was the first Pope, it seems to me when you read the Bible, he denied Christ 3 times before the cock crowed, right? So right up until the end, he was still not being that loyal, but he got to be the head of the church. So that's kind of the way I look at leadership. Leadership is, you know, it's kind of almost something that you're given, but it's not so much 100% that you're because you're the best person. It's just that somebody's got to kind of take that responsibility. And I do believe in the Silicon Valley kind of adage that you should try to stand on the shoulders of giants. So you should try. So my developer for the new Always On network, which I've never typed a, you know, code in my life, is graduated #1 in his class in Vietnam as a high school student out of 200,000 kids, and he's built 3 major platforms, and he's not even 35. So that guy's smarter than I am. Okay, so he's building it. My designer was the original art director of Rolling Stone magazine when he was 17 years old. So this guy is brilliant. There's very few people in the world that are as brilliant a designer of media properties as Roger Black. So again, much bigger than I am. So I think the key to leadership is to surround yourself with people that are just a lot smarter and better than you at what they do, and then empower them to do what they do well, but you know, always make everybody understand that somebody has to make the final decisions.
Sure.
And that's what I think the leader does.
Very good. How do you structure your business nowadays in terms of management?
Mm-hmm.
And what about your board?
Okay, well, right now, for the last 10 years, I've been operating a self-owned event company, okay? And I have, you know, a group of really smart people helping me produce those events. Now, about a year ago, I took in the first venture capital in the company's history, and I organized it legally like all Silicon Valley companies, which are usually Delaware corporations, C Corps. So it got remanufactured into a Delaware corp. We raised capital to capitalize the company, and then I went out and built the team to build the network. So the whole big upside and the big promise of the new company is going to be this network, which is going to radically transform the nature of our business, and we're going to be hiring a lot more people and having, you know, a much more sophisticated management team. So right now I have the chief designer, the chief architect, and a president and chief operating officer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the core base, and then we're going to build from there.
Who is the best investor? How to find the best investor?
Well, I think that in an ideal world, if you're out selling a dream, it's hopefully because you feel very passionate about that dream, right? And you want to do everything you can do to make that dream come true.
Mm-hmm.
So the best investor is someone who shares that dream, okay, and also help you do things and meet people that can help you grow your business. So interestingly, there is a well-known venture fund that I presented my business plan to. There is a well-known partner within that well-known venture firm that was very excited and gets my dream, but we were still very early in it. And he, I think, left on his own would have done it, but I think for the rest of his partners, we were still very early. But he came to my event. He has been referring me people. He is acting kind of right now as someone who's a believer. And I think his idea is that once we're launched and we can show a little traction, then he would like to bring it back to his partners. So for me, I feel very loyal to him, even though he hasn't actually invested, because he's already working for us and trying to make us, because he is a believer. So that's the kind of guy I like. Somebody who is going to, you know, think about you, what you're doing, and always kind of funnel resources that are more than money your way.
Very good. The last tip for the entrepreneur.
Last tip for the entrepreneur. I think that if you're very passionate about an idea, I think the way to build a billion-dollar internet company is you need to go out and see what people are already doing and build a service based upon the internet that helps people do what they're already doing, but in much fewer steps.
Very good. What's hands-on for you?
Well, it's much more fun than hands-off. and of course, coming from Always On, we look at hands-on as a sister.
Thank you very much. It was a very pleasure to have you here.
Sure.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your knowledge. And we're looking forward to see
just make sure you invite me back when we have the site to show.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Tony Perkins, I'll see you next round.